Today I want to talk to you about three things that are in the title of today's sermon, which is, what's your story, walking your path to spiritual growth? Our personal story is as it relates to our individual and unique human experiences that we have. It seeks answers to the big picture and the big questions that we get. And in the song, and some for the meditation and from the reading of the story, it speaks to the fact that as humans throughout all society and all history, all humans have asked that one question: why are we here? What's it all about, Alfie, if you will? And we seek those answers to those questions. When we look at our path, as we walk a path, the way I think of a path, it's a purposeful and deliberate direction that each of us have chosen, acknowledging that there really is no one right path. And if you think of the wheel of life, or just any wheel, there is the hub, and radiating from the hub, or the axle of the wheel, or the mandala, are many, many spokes, and we each are like that. We each have our own path that brought us here. And then the last part, the path to spiritual growth, when we take a look at defining and looking that notion of spirit and faith, you know, what is it? And as an educator for all of my life in public health and at a university setting, one of the things I always have a discussion with my students and people I work with is, when you say something, how will I know it if I see it? So we're going to talk about our path, spirituality, and what our stories are. Now, I've already said that what is common to all human societies is this notion of storytelling, and we deal as humans with myths, parables, stories to transmit facts, language, culture, our beliefs, our desires, etc. Before we had written language, it was always done orally. And so we always told stories. And one of the things that I've chosen as the main slide here is this image. And if you look at it, maybe some of you can relate to this idea of whether you were in school or at work or in class, that you constantly are involved in taking action and making decisions and trying to get things right to please somebody. And we have this desire to get it right. How many of you can remember being told, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing right? Yeah, you know, we have that. And yet, I always like to share this with people to understand that we oftentimes learn more by what doesn't happen. Most wisdom comes from learning from our oopses and our mistakes and others. And we always have many more learning experiences than we have successes. And so we create word pictures to tell our stories. Because the words that I use may not be the words that you would use. But yet through different images, we can create ideas that we can talk about and share. Now, all of you, except for a few in the back, are adults. And we as adults learn differently than children do. As adults, we learn and we attend to messages to the degree that each of us can paint ourselves in the picture, if you will. And so this is one example of, by my just touching base with you, that you actually, I saw some ascensions and some nods that you had some experience, so you're attending to this. Well, there's an old Native American tale, if you will, and it's the story of two wolves, and maybe some of you have seen this. One evening, an old Cherokee told his grandson about a battle that was going on inside him. He said, "My son, it is between two wolves. One is evil, anger, envy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. All of these sinister things." Next slide. The other is good. Joy, peace, love, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith. That other side of our lives. The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, which one wins in the battle? And the grandfather's answer is, the one that I feed. The one that I feed. And the purpose of this is another example about how our stories are, and that it's what we pay attention to. That in our lives we have this duality because we're humans. Being humans, we are limited. We are imperfect. We have that divine spark within us. And one of the unity concepts, we have is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. We are not God. We have that God consciousness and that divine spark within us. We feel at times divided, fractured, pulled in a dozen directions. William James, a Harvard-trained and professor of philosophy and psychology at Harvard University in the 1900s, in his book, The Variety of Religious Experiences, A Study in Human Nature, described the state of many humans who are on spiritual paths as being in a place of, quote, torn to pieces-hood. That we seek the balance, we seek the resolution of those conflicts that are within us. And I really appreciated that term, that torn to pieces-hood, because quite frankly, in my work and in my experiences in chronic disease prevention, as a health educator, and I don't know about you, I don't know how many of you ever got up in the morning and said, I feel great, I'm going to the doctor. I don't think you've done that.
No.
That people don't get to the hospital on their A game. People don't come in oftentimes to recovery programs in their A game. And oftentimes people don't come into congregations in bliss. They come in some conflict and seeking some relief. We seek meaning in the absurd, peace within the chaos, light within the darkness, etc. Well, I have a little activity that I would like you all to do for me, if you will. I would like you to think about what brought you to unity at this stage in your life. And specifically, I'd like you to come up with a few words in your own mind to answer these following 3 questions. This is related to your own story. Because there's a story for why and how all of you are sitting where you are today. The only thing that's real in your life and mine is we're all sitting at unity today. Everything else is just a projection. But right now, the truth is we're all in unity. So I would like you to think about and reflect on, if you will, what were your early spiritual or religious experiences that you had? Whether they came from family or others. Where did you get those initial ideas and practices and beliefs? And then another thing that's part of your story is, well, what happened to cause you to search for more? And I put that in quotes because for you, did you make a shift? Were you introduced to unity early on and it had always been where you've gone? Or did you have another experience? And due to some events in your life, you chose to seek other options. You're sitting here today. And lastly is, what is it like for you now? These are all part of your stories. In the recovering community, they have a saying. We want you to share what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. We share our experience, strength, and hope with each other. Now, one of the things that I will ask you to do very briefly, and I'm looking around the room, and every one of you is within earshot of at least 1 or 2 other people, and so what I am going to ask you to do is, as you've thought about these, I would like you to select just one part of your story, not your whole story. We don't have the time for that. Not your whole story, but just one part of it. And I would like you to turn to someone next to you, and if it's 2 or 3 people, I would like you to just share one part of this story. It may be what was an early experience. It may be what happened to you that caused you to seek something different. Or it may be, what is your spiritual path for you now? Do you understand what I'm asking you to share just very briefly with? And remember, it's all about comfort. And share only what your amount of information you're comfortable sharing. If you need to slide up next to someone else, that'd be fine. The noise level is going to come up just a little bit. That's okay. However far you've gotten with this activity is fine. However far you've gotten with this activity is fine. And Jim had asked, do I need to get some music? And one of the things that I've always known is if you just start talking, you don't have to really say anything in particular. And that individuals who are talking will finally get the message that something else is going on. And they will slowly on their own wind down their conversation. And usually within about 30 seconds or so, all the side conversations have stopped. And most everybody's eyes are back up to the front. And we're in that place now. Probably by the time I count to 5, all the rest of the conversations will be finished. So, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And you know, what's happened is all the other conversations. Well, I want to thank you all very much for participating in that activity. So, how was it to share a little bit of some part of your story with someone else? And for you to listen to someone else's story, just a slight piece of it. Yeah. How many of you, just with a show of hands, found out that to be a comfortable experience to do?
Yeah.
Because oftentimes, you know, we don't get a chance to talk about our God and our path. We come on Sundays or to another center to do that, but it's one of the things that if I had just sat down up here, y'all probably would have just kind of kept going. So thank you very much. One of the things that we find, and you may have found some similarities and there may have been some differences, my experience has been, and I've done a lot of reading, and I will just share with you, I want to give credit to the author Ernest Kurtz and Catherine Ketchum. And I'm going to be sharing some information and stories from this book, The Spirituality of Imperfection. And one of the interesting things about our humanness is we do have this paradox, ambiguity that resides at the heart of our human condition. We are a mixture of light and darkness, love and hate, trust and fear. We are sometimes saint, sometimes sinner, sometimes beast, sometimes angel. We are not and cannot be either or. We are both. It is and. And if you have a television and you see those Ford commercials, that the whole premise that they're doing lately is, wonder what the deal is with nuts and bolts. What if you only had one or the other? And the point is that we always have a little of both of those opposites within us. And if you think of the yin-yang symbol, that half is black and half is white, but within each of those shapes there's a dot of the dark in the light and a dot of the light in the dark. And so one of the stories that I want to share with you about this issue of imperfection and this duality, a preacher put this question to a class of children. If all the good people in the world were red, and all the bad people were green, what color would you be?
Purple.
Little Linda Jean thought mightily for a moment, then her face brightened and she replied, Reverend, I'd be streaky. Because at times it depends on the situation we're in, what comes forward, the kinds of experience we're in, and to recognize and to give ourselves permission to have both of those kinds of feelings. When we look at our path, this purposeful and deliberate direction, self-acceptance of our humanness and imperfection is very important, because on our path we are also seeking identity and community. It's what brought me here. And I came to help out once by an invitation from Jim, and I've been coming around now for a couple of months because there's some things that resonate with me.
Amen.
And so I have another little story here about self-acceptance of our imperfection. The chief executive of a large company was greatly admired for his energy and drive, but he suffered from one embarrassing weakness. Each time he entered the company's president's office to make his weekly report, he would wet his pants. The kindly president advised him to see a urologist at company expense. But when he appeared before the president the following weeks, his pants were wet again. "Didn't you see the urologist?" asked the company president. "No, he was out. I saw a psychiatrist instead. And I'm cured," the executive replied. "I no longer feel embarrassed." And so, the point to this type of a story that we get out of it is we have these problems, and somebody might think there's a solution, but the other part is, well, this just happens physiologically. We are imperfect. Things happen to us. Those of us that have aged more than others here, we understand that. And how we adapt and cope with our changing lives. And it is our acceptance of these things that leads to health, and to wholeness. Now, fundamental to our humanness is a root sense of connectedness to be a part of. And our spirituality is nurtured in community. The oneness with others that springs from shared visions, goals, shared memory, and shared hope. We seek relationships of mutuality. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
What are some things we share? We give by getting and get by giving. In the recovering community, they have a saying, you have to give it away to keep it. And the interesting thing is this, is when we ask for help, we provide another person the opportunity to be of service. And when we are in service to others, we get out of our own self-centeredness. One of the things is you may actually feel that it's pretty good if you meet somebody here to say, "Here, take my phone number and feel free to call me." And that's fine. That's one way of reaching out. The other part of that is to ask for that person's phone number. And then you call them. Because what we do in our recovery, it's proactive. What's the story? It's proactive. We, as individuals, have to take action. And as we seek community on our path, we also want to find people that we can identify with. One of the reasons that I come back here is I found some individuals that I enjoy their energy and I want to spend some time with. And there's another story in here that I want to read about, the availability of appropriate individuals with whom you can identify. This is from ancient writings, a Sufi story. A man walking through the forest saw a fox that had lost its legs, and he wondered how it lived. Then he saw a tiger come up with game in its mouth. The tiger ate its fill and left the rest of the meat for the fox. The next day, God fed the fox by means of the same tiger. The man began to wonder at God's greatness and said to himself, "I too shall just rest in a corner with full trust in the Lord, and He will provide me with all that I need." He did this for many days, but nothing happened. And he was almost at death's door when he heard a voice say, "O you who are in the path of error, open your eyes to the truth. Stop imitating the disabled fox and follow the example of the tiger." So instead of just waiting to be served, we get into service. And by being in service and in giving to others, like the story that Rob read from the Unity Word on Storytelling, it lets us know that we need to take actions on that. In our path, we seek to find a home and the place where we fit in precisely because of our limitations. Where we fit in not because of what we have, but because of what we lack. And the last story from here that I want to read is reflective of that. A man was looking for a good church to attend, and he happened to enter one in which the congregation and the preacher were reading from their prayer book. They were saying, "We have left undone those things which we ought to have done, and we have done those things which we ought not to have done." The man dropped into his seat, sighed with relief as he said to himself, "Thank goodness I found my crowd at last." You know, because we are imperfect and none of us have it all together all the time. But as a collective, we find that we can do those things. And the last thing that I want to share a little bit about is this notion of spirituality. And in my sense, spirituality is not religion and it is not therapy. There's a saying in some of the communities that I work with, religion is for people who fear going to hell, and spirituality is for those who have been there. Spirituality cannot be seen, but we nevertheless experience it. Spirituality is beyond the ordinary and not spectacular. It is essential but different, and each person is unique. How do we explore and get to know our spirituality? And how is an acronym? Honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. With those, we are well on our way. Now, there's one last thing that I'm going to indulge. I'd like you to indulge me. Now, one of the things, for those of you that have been coming to Unity, you know that at the back of the platform up here, we have two beautiful stained glass pieces, right? So as you look at the large one, can you all see it? You all know what's in there. You've been here enough. If not, what do we see? We see mountains, depictions of water, rocks, foliage, and a beautiful setting, right?
Sunshine.
Sunshine. And if we look over to this one behind Jim in the organ, we see clouds, rays of light. These are, would you say these are spiritual images?
Yeah.
Well, I'd like you to think a little bit deeper on it. When you look at each of these, can you pick which of the glass pieces or the colors or the separate scenes best represent spirit and spirituality? If we had the time and I asked you, we would probably see a wide range of differences. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I have a bias in that it is not any of the colors. It is not any of the scenes. It is not any of the general images. The divine substance, spirituality, our divine substance, can be found in the inconspicuous, gray, bland, flexible lead in the stained glass. The divine substance in us, as the lead in the stained glass, it is pervasive. It touches every surface. It goes to every depth. Through its simplicity and its yielding, it holds and binds everything together. And as a result, we are able to appreciate the image. So as you think of what's your story, and as you think of those things that represent spirit and spirituality with you, think of oftentimes of this particular image. And it is not always the big picture, but you have to look deeper to see the subtleties of it. Each of us has our own spiritual path, and as we explore our spirituality, we find ourselves on a journey of self-discovery. When we live with spiritual awareness, we find harmony with the God of our understanding and with ourselves and with others. There is no one single recipe for spirituality. Each of us finds our own way to live spiritually, and that allows us freedom to make choices about how we live. It's our own story, and it charges us with responsibility. And so remember, at Unity, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome. And I want to leave you with one last thought. God wants spiritual fruit, not religious nuts.